Okay, we are recording. So yeah, the preposition is if morality is what one ought to do, and if oughts are required step to a goal, and if only thing that sets up goals are internal personal impulses or wants simply, only morality that can exist is a form of egoism. That is a proposition.
Okay, so if we break these down by premises, so each premises starts with the if statement, and then the conclusion can be only morality that can exist is a form of egoism. I would say that premise one is true. Premise two is not true because it's an equivocation. Premise three in a vacuum would be true, but because the equivocation in premise two is not true, and that therefore the conclusion is valid. So when I'm talking about equivocation, I'm talking about the use of the term goal. It seems that the modality of goal in premise two is different to the modality of goal in premise three. So I can grant that a goal in a subjective sense, meaning mind dependent, is true and necessary for personal inner wants. However, I would say that we don't really have the like an epistemological understanding of where ought like etiologically come from, and as such, when we use the word goal in premise two, we have no idea if we're talking about subjective or objective goals. So I guess my question to you would be, why are you so sure that the goal in premise two is the same as the one in premise three?
Uh, well, because I made a proposition and I thought that and I intended it to mean the same thing.
Okay, so if we're talking about the modality of goal in premise three, then premise two is not true. So what's the argument for premise two?
Okay, let's talk about the premise too. So, uh, like we talking like premise two. So, odds are required steps to a goal. That is like the thing that we will discuss. I think that there is no other uh, definition of that can no other or meaning or definition that can be assigned to the word ought. I think that only thing that can possibly be proven with, or not even maybe proven, but argue for, uh, is that ought are just things that are steps in achieving a goal. So let's say if you want to play chess, you ought to move a piece. They are prerequisites. Does that make any sense to you?
Not really, because it doesn't really account for my critique. So yeah, I can grant in terms of like a collective, sorry, a yeah collective understanding of the term goal. Premise two is correct, but you said that because you formed the proposition, you're using the modality of goal with reference to premise three. And I'm saying if that's true, and I grant that, then I cannot get on board with the truth of premise two. So for example, I'm not necessarily questioning you on the use of the term or. I can grant all of that, and everything you said just then, I think bar the last bit, I can say is completely fine. I'm looking for the argument of why this always has to entail a subjective, mind-dependent goal. The exact type of language uses you're getting away with in premise three. So what's the argument for that?
So the word goal is in dispute, right?
Yeah,
Uh, so you think that there can be goals which are not personal?
yeah.
Do you mean like collective goals, or what do you mean? I cannot envision a goal which is not a person, which is not a personal one.
Okay, so when you say personal, is that like synonymous with subjective?
Yeah, that. So what I believe that goal is something that a personal subject aspires to or wants to achieve.
Okay, sure. So I guess this is where my argument for companionship guilt kind of comes in here, which is that we have good kind of apparatus, especially with comparison to all forms of epistemology, that we can use to judge whether or not this could be objective or subjective. An example of that could be moral intuition, another could be progress, another one could be reductio and hypotheticals. So we have like absolutely no reason to assume that one is dependent on the human mind. It could literally be a feature of ontology. Like when we look at a tree, we don't necessarily know whether or not the tree is a feature of ontology or it's an internal hallucination. The issue I'm having is that your proposition makes it explicit that you do believe that it has to be internal, which I don't understand. So what I just laid out just there is an example where it could be one or the other. And so I can kind of stay agnostic at the moment unless I hear the argument for why I should accept premise two.
Sebby, you're scared of me.
This is one-on-one talk, so Jordan, if you would please.
Excuse me.
Sorry, I kind of sorry, Sebby, I kind of like lost you midway. So, can you? I know this is like a bother. Can you please repeat your critique? Sorry to have to ask you to repeat, but can you?
So the argument I'm laying out at the moment to critique premise two is, in terms of like formal philosophy, is called the companions in guilt argument, which is that we can understand morality and make delineations between what is objective and subjective with reference to other forms of epistemology. So it seems that's why I use the tree as an example, and whether or not we have like access to knowing whether or not the tree is there. So the qualia that's generated by looking at a tree could either so you could like hypothesize whether or not it's a feature of ontology, so it's actually like can be attributed to the nature of being, or it could literally be an internal hallucination. I'm agnostic because I don't believe as human beings we have epistemic access to answer any of those questions, right? However, my problem with your proposition is that you seem to be so sure that it is the latter rather than the former, right? So I'm taking an agnostic position, unless you like make an argument. That's, by the way, not, you can't use like an argument for ignorance when you say, well, I just can't conceptualize of an objective goal, right? But that's like appealing to ignorance, which is obviously a fallacy. You can get that if you don't understand the truth, if you want. So I need like a formal positive argument why I should accept premise two, and specifically I'm looking for the modality and the validity of why you're using such modality in reference to the language usage of goal at the end of that premise two.
Okay. This is a bit, I believe, outside of my experience with philosophy, but I will try. Even though I suspect we can have like some different axioms of what is, how can we epistemologically know? So, what is the justification for knowledge? But okay, I believe that qualia in that case is like hard to say if that qualia like comes from something that is to connected to a tree, or if it is an internal hallucination. I don't see actually how that implies in this case, because even if there isn't anything outside, and if there is anything outside, it is irrelevant, because only the place that this call can come from is from inside. So if I missed something, but to me this seems like a good answer.
So when you say that it's coming from inside, I'm asking why you're saying that, or at least why should I believe that? Because my position, again, going back to making comparisons to other forms of knowledge structures, we are always it's always ambiguous. There's always an enigma, but we're always going to have to be agnostic on whether or not we can make delineations between what is subjective and objective, and that's why I used the example of a tree.
I mean, if you will be skeptical of knowledge, I understand the notion, but in that case, you are skeptical of all knowledge, and I personally am skeptical of not all knowledge too. I just think that justification for knowledge is like reason that you personally believe is like strong enough. And I don't think.
I mean, you can say that, but like during like a dialectic discussion now, it's like a little bit hard for me to just like immediately grant that, because then we immediately arrive at the conclusion of egoism. So if we are going to adopt an anti-realist position, then I don't know why we won't be skeptical all the way down. If you're asking me, like, can I present an argument that isn't privy to my specific critiques, I can do that if you want me to. But at the moment, I can't like just like accept because you don't strongly believe that.
Yeah, I would actually like to hear this argument. Regardless of this, I'm just interested in the argument that you will present, regardless of like this egoism thing. For a second, we can put it aside just for you to educate me a bit.
Sure. So in terms of our knowledge structures and the study of epistemology, it seems that we can deduct from evidence, and I think morality, I don't think there's any conditions that morality presupposes or engages with that would like negate the same way we interact with other forms of knowledge structures. So when I say deduct from evidence, the things I'm looking for is again the initial three I gave you, perhaps in my opening, I think it was intuition, progress, and moral problems. So the reason why I think egoism sucks relative to other forms of realist argumentation and theories is because I don't believe that it can accurately predict the patterns that emerge from these separate three pieces of apparatus. So I can give you like an example, right? So it seems that if we like examine intuition, the collective intuition, we examine the way in which legislation is progressing, and look at hypotheticals, reductios, and moral problems. It seems that imposition of will is one that seems to continuously come up in regards like trolley problems and utilitarian discussions. Like we consider if you're infringing upon someone's will, then that's something we can classify as immoral, and that's like a pattern that we can see and then predict new patterns coming up in the future, exactly with like 20th century discussions of abortion rights, like obviously the veganism conversation that's happening in the 21st century. If we adopt the egoist position, it seems to contradict like the levels of empirical understanding and epistemic, what do you say, stuff we put in the field of epistemology.
I understand it. I don't know how much you actually know about my position. I have like the whole this idea of and theory of morality that comes exactly from what you described. I mean, Denise, he can testify to that. But I think that social, let's say, let's just denominate like social morality, or if you want to use like sociological language like ethics. I think it is different than this. You can say like normative, because the reason of normative notion of morality that is in question. So even though I do recognize that moral language is most often used, and it's, I believe, even most appropriately used to describe this sociological morality that I believe you are describing, epistemic even morality, I would agree with that. It still has a problem of is there a reason to first of all, I'm not necessarily agreeing with your conclusion on like how this social morality looks like or what their rules are. It's just arguing that I'm just acknowledging that it exists. I think that it still is a problem, that there arises a problem of let's say isocap. So there isn't a reason for like I mean there are plenty. I mean there are reasons that can be ignored by the individual in their behavior, right? There isn't a reason that a person cannot reject, and in rejecting that reason, they lose the ought in morality, which is like kind of necessary component for this philosophical discussion, which isn't sociological. Even though I think the sociological discussion is more interesting and worthwhile having.
Yeah, everything you just said, I agree with. Okay, that's fine. However, egoism is a moral theory. It's trying to account for when people make moral expressions. What the hell are they trying to get at? And that's why I'm using like deduction of evidence and comparisons to other fields of knowledge as an example of why we should probably like move beyond egoist theory or even forms of anti-realism.
Yeah.
It seem to get patterns like realists, right?
I
So
just-
you said it's true, right? But I don't think it's like necessarily relevant in the discussion of expressionism or even anti-realism.
Yeah, I just want to like notion that the egoism that I am defending here is weak psychological egoism. So it is more of a descriptive than egoism, and I recognize the problems that it has is that like it is a closed theory and that it ends up in tautology, but I think it is the best epistemic. Basically, it has some problems calling it epistemic, but I think it's still the best explanation of how people make decisions, and I think that it is true in its description of decision-making process.
Okay, fuck yeah. I mean, I think in that sense I probably agree with you, but that's probably like demarked from discussions of like ethical egoism, right? Which is supposed to be a moral theory and it's supposed to be judged in relationship to the way in which people express themselves. Which I don't think the theory does account for, and so that's when we're talking about morality in the beginning of your proposition, that's what I assume this debate would be about. If you're going to say that people act and people are motivated by their preferences, then I can concede to that like immediately. That's definitely true. But I don't think that's what egoism is getting at. And if we're going to talk about egoism in the ethical sense, then that's where we're going to have to deduct from evidence and take a look at like the companions and guilt argument that laying forward at the beginning of the
Oh yeah, I will not defend normative egoism. That I think that is I'm only here to like defend. We should probably hash that out like before the debate. That I will only defend like weak psychological egoism. I personally don't think that there is other than this sociological like morality that there is anything that that warrants the use of moral language, because moral language carries weight, and I think only this sociological morality warrants the use of such heavy language.
Okay, tell me if I'm strawmanning you as I attempt to sum up your position, because it sounds like I'm like incredibly simplifying this, but I don't know I'm going wrong here. So is the position just that people act with accordance to their preferences?
Yeah, people act in accordance with their preferences, and they cannot act in any other way.
Okay, well then I guess we can go back to if you want to move this over to what I assume the conversation will be about, which is moral egoism, then we can discuss whether or not
We can
discuss whether or not these preferences can be, I guess, like decided based on some sort of objectivity.
I don't know what sort of objectivism you are aiming at. Like, I mean, other than like saying that these preferences are like the consequences of physical state of the brain, which can be like argue that it is objective, that like brain is in that state. But I mean that is I believe like a trivial discussion.
So like, because I'm trying to get to like some common ground. When you say that people act in accordance to their preferences, okay, that's definitely true, and they cannot not act in accordance to their preferences. That last part, it sounds like it's like symmetrically, obviously going to be tautologically true, but I feel there is an equivocation going on with the term preferences in the latter half of that statement, because I believe that again, by deductive evidence, we can see that like preferences can be massively influenced by things that I don't think are accounted for in your proposition, being that merely personal inner impulses. So I guess that's the more egoist like route I want to go down.
Okay, so uh, if I like understood your last thing, yeah, I say that you can influence a person, but whatever that influence does is again internalized. It cannot. It is the internal impulse that provides the motivation for. So even so, you cannot act against your preference. Your highest preference at any given time.
Yeah, I guess that's like somewhat true. So I'm still thinking about premise three.
So premise three, the goals can only arise from internal impulses, right?
Like again, sorry, I guess like there's a level of like vagueness here because I assume that like when people read premise three, they're going to be like encompassing it within like full like the totality of subjectivity. But if you're saying that, hold on, you can be influenced by objectivity, and that then you process through the psyche, and then that then accounts for subjectivity, and therefore premise three is true, then I guess premise three is true. But I don't think that necessarily entails moral egoism, at least in the conventional sense.
I mean, again, I think that it entails weak psychological egoism. So moral egoism is, I think, very hard to defend, and I don't want to defend it because I don't agree with it. I don't personally think that there is any reason to do that. Even if you could do something else that you don't want to, and I don't think that you can, I still don't see a reason why would you do something that you don't want to do.
Oh, sure. Okay, so for the conclusion, so I guess in lieu of only morality that can exist as a form of egoism, like you're specifically talking about, only morality can exist as a form of psychological egoism.
Yeah, only psychological egoism can exist, and I'm more inclined to believe that weak psychological influences, that weak psychological egoism is better than or more accurate than strong one.
Oh shit, okay, yeah, I guess that's my fault then. I just assumed the prevalence of morality in the proposition, we were talking about ethical egoism. But if it's psychological, then I think the proposition is probably true, yeah. And fuck, Ham was right the entire time. It is just trivially true.
Yeah, I mean, it's really true. I mean, I should probably talk to him. I shouldn't like discuss it now. We will discuss. Me and him will probably discuss this some other time. But now I think this is concluded. But I would like, if you have a bit of time, I'm there is something that I'm more interested in this real egoism thing, and that is that epistemic morality, or however you called it, because I have something similar, so I would like to like explore yours and maybe offer mine.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so you have like the floor to like say how do you think that it works and the rules and whatever.
Again, I guess I'll just be like following up or somewhat like repeating what I said at the beginning, which is that again, so at level of epistemology, we have no access to objectivity or subjectivity delineations as it pertains to morality. As such, we should be looking for, like we do in all forms of fields pertaining to knowledge, we look for patterns and see if they can be repeated across time. And if true, then it seems there's a very cogent case to be made for conditions in reference to what we can assume to have like mind-independent relevance. An example of that is like what I've already stated, being imposition of will, being deemed as what you ought not do. You ought not do that. Another one could be like the utilitarian axiom of mitigation of suffering. I think that accounts for a lot of the reductions and hypotheticals that philosophers argue over. And so as a result, it seems that this does away with the conventional categorization of objective or subjective morality. I believe that objective morality is a category error, and as a result, the negation of that is going to be incoherent. And so I don't believe we should be categorizing any such theory under those labels. So in lieu of that, we can then discuss this deduction from evidence that I'm using with companion and guild.
Yeah, I will just say it's much less technical. Uh, I think that same as you, that we ought to like do what we do for any other subject, look up and like do quote unquote study. But I came to the conclusion that not that the imposition of will. I came to the I immediately approached it from a bit more naturalistic angle. I think that what is like currently discussed as morality can be divided into two, and that those two function differently, have different origins, and they take different form as systems. One is so-called, I didn't name it, law of mutual aid. I don't know if you're familiar with that term.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you know what it is, so I don't have to explain it. I think that law of mutual aid is half of it, and I think that the other half is what I call pure morality, and that is simply the rules is more closely. I hate to say like non-aggression principle, but there is a trace of non-aggression principle. It's not a principle. Let's be fair, it's not a principle. It is all of this morality is like vague, not vague, but it's like unstable system. And it is simply the case that I believe that we have an instinct that causes us to, or well, instinct means internal impulse that I believe is inheritable. That is preventing us from assaulting those who did not assault and punishing those who did. And I know that like using the word innocent has some implications, so I would like for you to be like charitable in like absence of more accurate term, because I didn't come up with one. That as assaulting innocent triggers impulse and causes the heavier of the impulse to try and carry out punishment. And that carry out punishment is different than helping the victim. Helping the victim comes from the law of mutual aid. And I believe the more law of mutual aid comes from, in how Peter Singer says, that morality comes like circles of moral consideration. And I think that law of mutual aid is like dependent on both geographical and emotional closeness. So the closer you are geographically and like emotionally to the person that you understand. And I don't think that moral instinct is necessarily, at least not to the same degree. I think it is much less dependent on geography and emotional closeness. So it's much more universal, and it creates a much wider and system. It creates a system that you are basically not afraid to go somewhere you haven't gone before and be afraid that you'll be killed.
Okay, yeah, that's an interesting system. I guess it's something that we're drawing these conclusions from what I assume to be similar apparatus. Can I just clarify in terms of intuition, progress, and reductio, whether or not that is the apparatus we're using to arrive at the conditions? And the second question would be, would you say that we're moving past this superficial delineation of mind dependent / independent?
Yeah, that's irrelevant. That's trivial to this discussion. I think we both know what we are talking about. We are talking about some sociological system or phenomena, and there is no place, I believe, or if there is a place, it's a trivial place to subjectivity, objectivity debate in this.
Okay, cool, fair. So, can I ask about like the methodology of how you're arriving these conclusions? Would you say it's the same as the stuff I laid out?
I specifically looked at culture, not like the influence of the culture, but I used every culture as an equally valued data point. So I did not ponder for like proclivity of I don't know Western Christian culture and uh, give it a like a bigger ponder than some tribe in the Amazon or whatever. That I have, of course, I cannot claim that I studied every culture, but I did quite a few, and basically all that I was able to find to a degree that would understand me, give me the understanding of their behavior, customs, laws, and like traditions and so on. Something that I can gather this moral data from. And I did that to control for what I believe is influence of so I did it to control the influence of prominent individuals and their preferences, and some rational considerations due to the environmental or resource considerations. So, yeah.
Fuck, there's a technical term that's escaping me at the moment, but no idea it's from yesterday. Do you have any faith or any reason to believe that you're going to be able to like, narrow this down to a singular condition, or do you think it's going to be like multifaceted? Because at the moment, I can't believe that it's going to come down to one like fundamental accident. Do you like ponder that question?
I didn't ponder the question. No. To be fair, I don't understand half of the things that Noah says.
Yeah. I don't know where you want to take the conversation now. Do you want like just do like reductios on each other's positions?
I mean, yeah, I will. I mean, it's very rare for me. I don't know how it's for you. It's very rare for me who has like the same notion what morality is, even though I suspect we don't agree in like what the rules of morality is, but just what it is, I think we agree.
Well, the real question is how can you put rules on morality when morality is subjective?
We are not talking about that.
Okay, let's talk dog or detail rather. I want to talk to you so badly, okay? Can you tell me your schedule? We'll talk straight after this while I'm having a conversation.
Okay. I'll be available at like maybe an hour later. I just got done with job interviews.
Okay, no worries. Is your proposition? Actually, we'll talk about it after. Okay, cool. So barbarian. So yeah, you're happy to like run.
Yeah, I would also like to. I mean, I can take a second and for you to explain how did you gather your data points.
Yeah. So at the moment, it seems to literally just be the third category at the moment, which is sorry, not literally, but like in terms of like explaining to you or providing proof, it's going to be like the latter piece of apparatus. Although because it seems to answer that fundamental kind of tool that we have at our disposal, then and that also account for the initial piece of apparatus, which is intuition, then progress probably will fall into place. So yeah, I haven't done so much in regards to progress. I'm not necessarily be able to go into the history view right now. But yeah, in terms of like problems, it seems that if we start with like the utilitarian assumption that we ought not maximize like negative qualia or displeasurable experiences, then we can look at like okay, what is like a problem? So we can like snatch 3 people off the street, we can torture them, skin them to death, really destroy their life, but we hope to arrive at a cure that's going to massively maximize the experiences of thousands and thousands of other people. Is that moral? Or intuitively, a majority of people will probably say no, that's not. And so that perhaps negates the what do you say, the singular axiom of the utilitarian position. And so that's when we bring in something like what I initially say, immoral impositions of will. And so you can like clarify that position to make sure it's solid by doing the symmetrical hypothetical, which would be, well, would you like allow these people to suffer, the thousand people we use in the initial hypothetical, to suffer this terrible disease if it meant that you could save the 3 people that you were going to skin and torture to arrive at the medication? Well, so that's the symmetrical hypothetical. So if you assume in like traditional thinking that therefore the answer is going to remain consistent, well then you should do that to extent to the first one. But no, I think the intuition will probably negate that and say no, that is also going to be wrong. And so that seems a bit strange. So just in the utilitarian positions can account for that. So we should move over to something like immoral will that actually then does reconcile those two like what would seemingly be paradoxical conclusions.
I would tell you, I think that like that doesn't like answer my question. How did you get the data points? But I think that I mean I can answer if you want, like how I think it will be in system that I like described. I think that it would be immoral to torture those people. Like it would break the system, but that doesn't tell me anything that what about what I should personally do. If is that making any sense?
So can I address the first question? So when you said you're asking for data points,
I mean, you said that it can. I don't know if that is the only thing that is in your like understanding of morality would be like immoral, and that is like imposition of will. So I'm interested in like how did you come to that conclusion that?
I strongly disagree. I agree that it's good.
I think I was hoping that this would be like 1-on-1. So if you can reframe yourself, go ahead, Sebby.
So when you say you're asking for data points, I thought that was going to stem from the 3 bits of apparatus I gave out for how I've come to this conclusion, and it would be the intuition, the progress, and the abstraction.
Yeah, but what research did you do for all of those 3?
Well, how would you research moral problems and reductivity if it wasn't through philosophical thinking?
Well, if we are going to like how we do epistemology, right? We will look for data points. And if you think that only data points is like philosophical, I mean, yeah, but but philosophy is just exploration of like imaginary space. It is. It has very little like scientific value on itself, especially in this like field of even like if sociology or whatever. If we believe that morality can only come from like these things that give us epistemic knowledge, then we need to do basically research that would result in that knowledge.
Yeah, but like the axiomatic structure of science and of philosophy are completely disanalogous. So that's why when we talk about morality and I'm putting it in the camp of the philosophy of ethics, then it's difficult to give you like concrete empirical data points when I've already laid out the 3 pieces.
Oh, so you are putting it in because I am putting it more in like a scientific realm than a philosophical one.
Okay, yeah, I guess we can talk about that. But it seems that like, so hold on, I'm not sure what we necessarily like. How we like root back to the original question. Okay, so I'll think about this then. The reason I'm placing it within the category of philosophy of ethics is because it would stem from intuition.
Yeah, I mean, mine stems from intuition too. Intuition, like when I say intuition, I'm mean like intuition is in this case an instinct, right? We have, like, not we, but humanity, I believe, have tendency to act in a certain way, and that you can say we tend to have this intuition, right? And that intuition produces some effects onto this world, right? And we can study those effects, and from those effects go to and speculate about causes of those effects. And the best explanation is the intuition, right? So we start with not with intuition, we start with things that we can like gather data on, and then we look for the causations of those effects. And I believe that it is intuition. So yeah, I'm again doing it from, well, not from, but again it comes down to intuition. If people wouldn't have this intuition that X is wrong, right, they wouldn't try to not do and prevent X from happening.
But this is why I'm like specifically bringing up the axiomatic structure of both science and philosophy, because if we agree that this is like stemming from intuition, intuition is going to be the precondition to logical positivism and/or empiricism. So if true, and I think that also is compatible with my companions and guilt argument, because obviously all forms of like logical fundamentalism is always going to be presupposed, then we're going to have to like talk about things that are like outside the primitives of any form of like positivistic empiricism.
I will be honest, I understand like half of that. But Zoom is asking a good question. Is it possible that we are talking about two different types of intuition?
I guess like what do you take intuition to be?
Well, again, I say that intuition is just an internal impulse. That something feels right, so it is right. That is like intuition, right? We have a proclivity to believe that something is, and that is like internal impulse. I don't know what you think by intuition.
Okay, yeah. So if Zoom wants to like cash out the distinction, because I can like admit obviously there's going to be a descriptive distinction, but I'm not sure like the conditions of this analogous such we can't make comparatives to them. So I mean, like if you want to get on and give you like the epistemological analysis conversation, we can do that. But yeah, I mean they're similar enough in the case that they're presupposed. I'm sure that's the only condition that needs to be met to like allow the comparison to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that, probably. I would just ask you.
I can't give you like data points in the empirical sense, but I'm not sure. Like I even like grant that we are talking about empiricism, or should be rather. Or can.
So, I didn't hear. Are you glad or are you not glad?
I'm sorry, what?
Are you glad that we are talking about empiricism or not glad?
I guess I'm not glad.
Oh, you are not. Okay. I like things like I think that for somebody who has a position like yours, I thought that you would be glad to talk about it, because I think that it would provide like a stronger case for that this morality is something that is more than I don't want to say like philosophical nonsense, but something more tangible than philosophy can offer.
Okay, yeah, sure. So to be super charitable in this conversation, I'm like enjoying it, because we both agree on how we what do you say, generate conclusions in relationship to morality. We both agree that, however, we're categorizing them differently or providing evidence for our conclusions differently. Then I think we can kind of move forward and try to like build like who has the more sophisticated argument, who is the better, who has the better, as usual, data points to provide evidence for their conclusion. But like, like we agree enough that we can probably move forward from
Uh, okay, let's try that.
Yeah, so I again, because I'm thinking it in the philosophical sense, I can only provide you with one of three of my conditions for arriving at a conclusion, which would be intuition and abstraction. Sorry, to be super clear, when I did give that evidence, you said that you did have a response relative to to hypothetical earlier.
Relative to what?
For the hypotheticals I gave about kidnapping people.
Yeah. I think that like descriptively in my if my moral system is like correct, if I interpret it correctly, that would be breaking the system. It would be in moral act deserving of punishment, but that doesn't mean anything for me personally. If I more desire to break the morality, I will break it and torture the people.
Okay, so we'll talk about like purpose of your system like momentarily, but first, can you like answer under your moral system your answer to hypothetical 1, hypothetical 2?
I only remember the hypothetical of like torturing 3 people to save 1,000 or something. I don't remember what was the second one. And it would be immoral to torture 3 people to save 1,000.
Okay, and then the reverse of that, so that this symmetric hypothetical, which would encounter hypothetical 2, would be that you feel, you like, I guess, like, you impart like a biological weapon on thousands of people, causing them to die of this horrible disease to save 3 people that are going to get tortured and skinned and whatnot.
Well, again, it would be equally, well, not equally, but it would still be immoral action. It would be even, it would be immoral action to steal $1 from Elon Musk to save the universe.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So that's the problem that I came up with because it's the reverse hypothetical to hypothetical 1. Then you assume that the conclusion would be consistent with reversing hypothetical, but because it's not, I think that entails the condition that I laid out, which is the immoral imposition of will. And so if it's not that, then like what would your so how does your morality arrive at that conclusion if it's not through that condition?
Simply my morality, because it is dependent on what triggers the moral instinct, and that actually, so that was like enshrined into a system that certain actions are punished. Like usually, I'm like doing post-ante like analysis. That those actions tend, so the actions that tend to trigger this instinct tend to be punished. So those actions are there is like only a few things that like triggers the moral instinct, and killing and torturing of people both triggers it. So it is sort of like deontological in its internal logic.
Okay. Yeah, I guess maybe I don't fully understand the system. Okay, could you like possibly like write it down for me, and then maybe we'll discuss it again some other time? Like much deeper logic than my kind of like singular conditions.
I mean, they're not. I mean, there isn't really any deeper logic. It's like 2 inches deep.
Okay, sure, but I still, even with your explanation, I don't like fully understand why we're then like entailing this, like what this would entail in moral action or we all want to.
It entails nothing. I don't think that I can cross Izod gap. That is why I think that any person acts in a way uh, of a weak psychological egoist. Every person, like, individually acts. It is only the actions of the collective, basically, produces the moral system, because people have proclivities, sorry, or shared, well, not shared, but common intuitions or instincts, however you want to call it, that certain actions are repeated over and over again by many people, and from that arises a non-formal system, and that non-formal system is morality.
Okay, cool. So I guess we do have something to disagree on that. So, when you say that your sort of like entails nothing and the citation would be Hume's guillotine, I don't necessarily believe that that's like an unassailable gap that can't be accounted for with any traditionalist like normative framework. So, for example, mine, for example, could account for that because we have this initial axiom that then normatively loads all descriptive claims. Then you have them bridge the gap between that which is ought and that which is.
Sorry, are you? I understood like the first half, second half. I don't know if you broke or something.
Yeah, sure. So this is why this system, this realist kind of framework is so good because it would account for things like Hume's guillotine, whereas like conceptualizing with subjective or anti-realist like doesn't. Okay, so here's the argument. So you can bridge the fact value distinction in a sense by establishing an initial axiom, right? So it's going to be descriptive. This thing we're going to say is prescriptively what we ought not do. Okay, cool. And then we look at all descriptive claims, and if they contradict with the axiom, then we deem that wrong. The question then is, well, hold on. If the axiom is descriptive, then why ought we accept the axiom? But that's assuming that like the logic of the following extrapolation past the axiom is consistent like before the axiom, which I don't believe is true because I've cited intuition and moral reductios and the philosophy of ethics and that's apparatus as what we're using to even get to the axiom. So Hume's guillotine isn't relevant with any discussion for the preconditions of that axiom that we're arriving at. That's why I'm so concerned with conditions and generating them from hypotheticals.
I'll be honest, I didn't follow, so I will ask. I am actually not that good at like philosophy, but I will ask a stupid and simple question. So, well, let's say that I still don't know. So, why would an individual act in accordance with morality? Let's say morality like incentivize me not to kill John. Okay, John is innocent, and moral system protects John and says that if I kill him, I have a chance of being punished. So if I don't care about that chance of punishment, and I don't have personal feelings, that personal intuitions or personal like internal moral instinct, not to do it, and I have some other internal motivation, let's say money, so instinct to accumulate resources. Why should I act on an instinct or intuition that I personally don't have, and I don't believe that I will suffer punishment, or that punishment I can evade or something. So I don't care about the punishment. That is irrelevant to me in my decision-making process. I don't see a reason not to kill Jonathan.
Well, it depends if they're like an alpha agent. Actually, I'll quit with the jargon. So it depends if they're rational or if they're irrational. If they're rational and they act in accordance to reason rather, then if you're using my framework for morality, then you can have stance-independent reasons because it'd be consistent with my realist framework, which again is in accordance with those 3 bits of apparatus we're using to generate conclusions. and they're independent of anyone's stances or anyone's superficial preferences. I mean, if they're irrational, then obviously no dialectic or no discussion is going to change that.
I mean, I don't know what you mean by rational. I mean, even if the person is capable of rational thoughts, like it is capable of like meticulously planning the murder of John.
When I'm using the term rational, I'm just talking about in accordance to reason. And when we're talking about philosophy of ethics, then reason is obviously relative to morality. And I'm like steelmanning the case for like a realist moral framework, which I believe is true because it can like predict patterns in the future.
Yeah, I don't have that level of understanding of philosophy. So I'm not. I'm just asking a more simple question. So if again, I believe that for any action, that basically it is so the goal that is set. So I want to kill John is a goal, or I want to acquire money, and let's say I want to acquire money, and for the most, let's say, easiest way that I believe to acquire money is to kill John and steal his money. So the goal is set to acquire money, and logic or whatever reason is implemented in that the easiest way to do it is to kill John. And if I don't if I don't have internal triggers or what internal instincts that would change my mind, and I don't fear so again, one of those would be the fear of punishment. And if I don't have this internal fear of punishment, I don't have anything to change the goal. And the goal was set non-cognitively. The goal was set by my internal, well, you can say it intuition, but like instinct, it doesn't really matter. It was the internalized impulse that created the goal. And the reason was used to achieve the goal. So I don't see why I shouldn't kill John and steal his money.
So I guess the response would be that this is the great thing about Hume's guillotine in terms of like the fact or distinction. So I'll try to make this as simple as possible. Okay, so using the system that I laid out for morality, the realist system. So if that is true, then the prescriptions entailed by my framework will be the highest level of reason. Okay, so whatever preference you have for stealing money or doing bad action X is going to be contradicted by my realist system. So if you say, well, hold on, I don't give a fuck about that realist system. I really want to get this money and go out and do that, then obviously you can do that, and there's no legislation preventing you from doing. I won't act for legislation. I won't bring that up. That's fine. Then you'd be considered under my system an irrational actor.
Yeah, but in I don't know what is like the point of any. I don't know. I don't know. I think that at that point, like even like I don't want to say like, trivial, but your morality like it's useless. Like if only incentive that there is to follow is that you would be considered the most rational by very, let's be frank, I don't think many people like share this view, by many people, and only thing that if you don't follow it, you will be considered irrational. So I don't see that even if you prescribe that and say that it is true that what whoever killed John was irrational, I mean it means nothing to either the John or the killer.
Yeah, that's fine, but I don't think that's entailed by like philosophy of ethics discussions. All I'm trying to do is account for what the hell this like nebulous thing that we consider to be morality is. That's all my job is at the moment. If you want to talk about legislation, if you want to talk about like pragmatism, if you want to talk about how we can implement this to create a better society, we can do that. But I'm just trying to label down this like what seems to like a lot of people in philosophy to be completely back to us because it was so defined thing. I believe my theory, or other forms of modalism, this theory accounts for those concerns and those critiques. So that's what we're talking about right now. I understand the average Joe on the street doesn't care if Sebby in his university room is indeed irrational, but that's not really what I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to present like a cogent and coherent articulation of what we call morality, and if there's like a pattern that is like be concrete unified.
Yeah, I think in the first I thought that we have like the same notion of what morality is, but now I see that we don't. I don't know. I think that like we'll probably know this better than that. That the word morality like changed so much that now in the philosophical like sphere, it is basically so so far removed from like the common use of the word that it basically became its own thing, and in becoming its own thing, it lost all the value the discussion on morality even have. So it's basically, I think that philosophical discussion of morality is useless.
Okay. I guess yeah. I mean, this is a different conversation to whether or not like philosophy ethics has you. So we can talk about that if you want right now. But yeah, in terms of like crafting, like compelling theories of morality, I'm not sure like the utilitarian argument or discussion is that relevant. But yeah, we can talk about that if you want. I mean, I believe that like getting down the thing that unifies like all ethical discussion would be like found useful to people that are forming legislation or deciding what they should do, and whether or not they are like acting in accordance to the reason. I think that's why people have discussions on even like superficial normative issues like abortion, veganism, and other like political / social topics.
I think that this discussion of like topics, let's say abortion, I think that this discussion is nothing more than evaluation of personal instincts. So it is contemplation on your instincts, and also it is important to like because as I think that morality is a societal game, let's say it like that. It is also important to like probe the instincts of others, because we are we didn't constantly deal with always new arising questions of morality as we are now, and it is not due to more consideration or anything. It is simply due to rapid change in our living situations, and I mean like technological. We have much more things happening now, and so there is much more circumstances to be thinking of. But as I believe that instincts are inherited and that they are basically evolutionary in nature, even though I know that sounds like cheesy and corny and stupid, that means that they don't change all that fast. And what we are doing in discussion is simply trying to find, okay, so what is our instinct? And in this, I don't think that what the most prudent thing to do is to turn to philosophers and and see what, I don't know, they logically concluded. I think it is simply the case that should be very careful of influence of personal preferences of influential people, and that we, I mean, should, but it's like an advice for how I think that to be cautious. What I would do, I'm like cautious of influence of influential people, and I'm cautious to giving a statement for which there is very little evidence. In the grand scheme of things, one culture, and we are rapidly becoming one culture, is simply a single data point. And every culture had their unique, let's say, flavors. But if you look, there are only like very few universal like rules which were applied, and I believe that only those are morality. So yeah, sorry to, but just for as I don't know person, I don't want to call myself philosopher. I think like Joe Small on the street, but I don't feel comfortable telling anybody anything other than I like this and I don't like that.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so now I understand your psychological egoist perspective that I assumed or I conflated with like ethical egoism. I understand when you're using language like instinct. However, I think to the average person that perhaps like has entered the VC recently, that sounds like it has like non-cognitivist implications, which again when you finalize that what you were just saying then, and you said I like this or I don't like that. That again sounds synonymous with like omittance of like truth, act, moral statements. However, I don't think that's necessarily the case. It doesn't sound that, considering we've talked about kind of the totality of objectivity being channeled through the psyche and therefore generating the aspect of subjectivity that was found in your initial proposition. I understand a little bit more that this doesn't look like a theory of moral expression. It may literally just be like a conversation on the utility of the philosophy of ethics in general. And you know what? I think I probably agree with you then. That's fine, but it definitely doesn't track my understanding of like moral like theorems or the way at least I've come across my conceptualization of morality. And again, just you mentioned how like the constantly like evolving and ideologically inconsistent definition of morality. When I'm talking about morality, I'm just talking about like the mechanism by which we do anything we ought or not do. I think if you like Google morality, says something about like matters concerning good or evil. So
I understand. I mean, it's not like I didn't like look a little bit into like morality and Google it. I mean, I have like this conversation for a very long time, but to this day, I still see very little like personal reasons to pick up philosophy book and fight the text for basically very little like information only, or very little information that I would consider like to have any like true value other than just opinion of a certain author. Like I don't give any more value to any of opinion or preference of any given individual more than the other one. I don't see a reason to. So, yeah, I think I understand that like it is a problem for me when I'm engaged with like philosophical discussions, but it's just because I like hate philosophy basically. I don't think that it is very useful. I mean, there are some like philosophy or science or something like can be argued that it is useful, but I think that first of all, it's not very interesting for most people. Like morality is much more interesting because it is bombastic, and people love to I don't want to say order people around, but to tell people like, oh, this is what you should do. This is the correct way. And I, what for? However, you came to this conclusion that this is the right way. I still don't think that because some person says that it is the right way, that you have to do it if you don't have the internal impulse. Even though, well, you can like internalize that input, but if you don't, if that doesn't happen, then okay, it's just shouting in the streets.
Okay, so very quickly in like defensive philosophy, I do agree with you that like I say, virtually all of the philosophical problems will be handled over science one day, or at least like a large majority of them. However, like, in terms of like the utility of picking up a philosophy book, it seems that like the questions and answers that science cannot account for yet seem to be in the space in the place of philosophy. So we've seen that again, looking at kind of historical progress. We've seen that with like philosophy of mind, discussions of mind physicalism have been handed over to neuroscience. Like the philosophy of like someone like Sigmund Freud is now disregarded in lieu of like neuroscience. So I would say that if you are going to pick up philosophy, it will be with that type of like mindset in mind. So yeah, I think that's probably why we've had this conversation, and I do agree that when I mentioned deduction of evidence in regards to entailing any sort of comment regarding moral expressions, that will one day hopefully be picked up by science. In regards to like data points. I mean, if you're doing that at the moment, then you can see this happening over time, I guess.
Yeah, I think that it is time for ethical discussions to be removed from philosophy and handed out to psychology and sociology, respectively. And yeah, that's it. I think we have like came to the conclusion.
I mean, yeah, I definitely agree with you in principle. It's probably a little bit too early personally for me, but considering that we don't even subscribe to like the objective subjective delineation, then I can completely understand why we like get to that conclusion. So yeah, I agree. Awesome.
Great, this was a very constructive talk. So I will now stop the recording.